Hi there. In this video, I go over the 5 tips I wish I knew earlier in animation. Now, I'm no expert. I literally began animating 8 months ago, so when I tell you I wish I knew earlier, just know I'm still using these tricks today. And I'm not going to go over the usual, stay confident, your animations are going to suck, and that's okay kind of stuff. That's to be expected. Or to learn the 12 principles of animation first, as that's also commonly known. These are the tips I've learned on my journey, so without further ado, let's begin. Tip number 1. Add line boiling for subtle organic movement. To give your animations a more hand-drawn, organic feel, slightly vary the outlines of your characters or objects on every frame. This technique is called a line boiling, and adds subtle movement and life to static elements like background objects or character poses, making them feel less rigid. Even small, non-moving objects can look more dynamic this way, and I've actually already shown an example of this within the first seconds of this video. The opening card of Hello was a usage of line boiling to bring your attention to the main action of the scene. Tip number 2 is to play your animation back in a separate window. This tip is specifically for people whose hardware they're animating on isn't necessarily the strongest or most up-to-date. When using different styles of paintbrushes in Adobe Animate, for example, you might find your computer start to lag as it struggles to render the frame. Depending on how many strokes you make with the brush, it may take longer. So while you can loop your animation on the sketch screen, if you press Ctrl Enter or this button at the top right, you can play your animation back looped with no lag, as it's a sort of preview for your animation when you export it. Tip number 3 is to use non-symmetric blinks for natural eye movements. So what I mean by this is to make the character's blinks more natural, to try and avoid both eyelids blinking in perfect symmetry. Real blinks often have one eyelid closed slightly faster than the other, usually being the top one, or they don't completely close together. Tip number 4 is to animate the foreground, midground, and background separately for parallax. This is also good to just keep in mind for healthy animating practices, but to create a sense of depth in your 2D scenes, apply a parallax effect by animating all these 3 grounds differently. As the camera or character moves, the foreground should move faster than the background, creating an illusion of 3D space. Like I said, this is also good general practice as you can turn off certain layers to avoid confusing elements when animating and drawing. This last tip, tip number 5, is kind of a 2-in-1, and it's to hold frames for tension and to intentionally skip frames for impact. So we'll start with the first one. In moments of suspense or tension, you can hold frames where the character or scene stays still for a few extra frames. This could be before impact, before an explosion, and it uses the principle of anticipation. You can hold a key pose for 5 to 10 frames longer than usual is my suggestion, as this brief moment of stillness heightens the impact when the motion resumes. So to avoid it feeling static, you can add tiny movements such as a slight tremble or a flicker of the eyes, but overall, it's kind of like when you see a rocket get shot into the mountains. There's a little bit of a pause, and then the explosion happens. The opposite of this is, like I said, intentionally skipping frames for impact. So to add a punchy, kind of jerky feeling to certain actions, you can actually skip frames. This technique breaks the smoothness of the action and can give weight to impactful scenes like a punch. And so on that note, when animating a punch or when the arm extends, I suggest skipping maybe 2 to 3 frames, depending on how many frames you are animating per second. For me, it's 30. So the action jumps to its final position. This quick snap to the endpoint emphasizes the speed and power of the punch. Just be careful not to use this technique too much, as it can be jarring and a bit herky-jerky if applied too often. And there we have it. These are just 5 useful animation tips I've discovered along my journey of learning animation. Again, these are by no means professional tips, but rather tricks I've found that have helped me along the way. Have a great day or night, and I'll see you all next time.